I started leading Bible study at St. Francis Apartments this past Wednesday. These apartments are a joint effort between St. Luke's Hospital and CHUM, and they serve older adults who have experienced homelessness. We read the text from last week, the first John text and the John text, Gospel of John text, both of which are filled with the talk of love. That begins with God's love and then the call to love our neighbors as ourselves. So me being me, asked one of the attendees if they love themselves. And she said, "I'm out of here," and picked up her things and left. Of course, I felt bad, but in retelling it, I just have to laugh. The texts are, after all, about loving ourselves, so I then have to love this self of mine that is such an idiot to ask such a direct, personal, intimate question in the first 10 minutes that I've met someone. But that's part of who I am. Some of you know that, and always have been. And sometimes it's really a great thing. But sometimes it leads to, "I'm out of here." That was supposed to be funny. I mean, you gotta laugh, right? I mean, you just gotta laugh. For our Inquirers new member gatherings, we have questions that our nurturers, our sponsors, ask the new people in order to get to know them a little bit better and introduce them to the larger congregation so you can see their photo in the next mustard seed and read a little bit about our new members. We have, as I said, 19 people join the congregation this morning, which is awesome. Well, in this nurture sheet, there are 6 questions we ask. But there's a thick black line after the first 3 because our church members who organized these sessions a number of years ago said the questions below the line were kind of too deep and personal questions to start with. Guess whose questions they were? Again, I have to laugh. But if I'm to love my neighbor as I love myself, it means I have to love the whole of me. I have to love this part of me that opens mouth and inserts foot. I have to love this part of me that asks questions that lead people to say, "Let's just put a line here." Anything we love, anyone we love, means we have to love the whole, the fullness. As Martin Luther says, we are both saints and we have to love the whole. We can't just love the part we like. That's not true love. That's not the perfect love that casts out fear that we heard about last week. For instance, to say we love Duluth, it can't just be the lake, the trails, the outcroppings, the agates, the music, the community. It also has to include the history. It's never made sense to me, that phrase, love it or leave it. Because the true love, the stronger love, the more honest love, is the one that looks at the whole and still makes the claim. Like Jesus looks at the whole of us and still makes the claim that we are loved. That's partially why we invite you to read Robert P. Jones' book, The Hidden Roots of White Supremacy and a Path into a Shared American Future. We hope people will at least read the second section, which covers the history of Minnesota in general and Duluth in particular. The painful realities of the 38 Dakota in Mankato who were hanged in 1862. The lynching of Clayton Jackson and McGee, the 3 African-American circus workers in Duluth in 1920. One of our church leaders said a few months back that when George Floyd was killed, part of what was so hard for him was that this was his home state. It's not how he thought about his home. that that would take place here. But the roots of that behavior are in the history of the state. That doesn't mean we love Duluth or Minnesota less. It means it's a full, true love to know the history and to love it. We could compare it to married love. Married couples know everything they like about each other and everything that tests that. Probably could have an amen there, right? But I won't put you on the spot. Marriage is knowing and loving the whole. I find I'm actually pretty good at learning the whole of an individual. I mean, it's actually what helps me love them. I'm pretty good, not to say I don't get highly frustrated, but I can love a whole congregation in the fullness of their branches, even when some need to be pruned or some need to be cut off in order to bear more fruit. I can read the history of racism, sexism, the history of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. My blood pressure for sure climbs pretty high, but I can seek out the truth, to know and love the whole, the saint and the sinner part. But the hardest thing for me to fully know and thereby fully love is creation. Because I am so overwhelmed and it's so painful and I feel so utterly helpless when I hear the truth of where things stand. So we can celebrate spring as we do today and put the birds on the trees and the butterflies and celebrate the trees budding and the flowers coming up and the birds singing and be out there and clean up around our congregation or building. And we can lift up Psalm 98 where the trees clap their hands and rivers sing for joy. But the reality of global warming is that trees are dying and bird species are becoming extinct. So to love creation is not to pretend that that isn't so. One of the scariest facts shared at the Eco Faith Summit that was held here a couple weeks ago that has stuck with me is that 50% of the oxygen in the atmosphere is supplied by phytoplankton. It both converts sunlight into food and oxygen and also serves as like a vacuum cleaner to sweep up carbon dioxide. And of course, it's also an essential part of the food chain. Phytoplankton currently is under great stress globally. In some places, the population is crashing. In other places, it's overproducing, which is also damaging. If it collapses, humans will suffocate. Or as Larry Rasmussen, the speaker of the day, who was sharing all this, said, well, or we could all walk around with oxygen tanks, provided that healthcare providers have enough oxygen for tanks for 8 billion Homo sapiens. To love our neighbor, the phytoplankton, is clearly to love ourselves. And to love phytoplankton is to be moved to live differently in order to protect it. So how do we love all our neighbors as ourselves without being completely overwhelmed, depressed, devolving into powerlessness and hopelessness? Jesus knows that this is how his disciples are going to feel when he gets crucified. Today's passage about the vine is part of his farewell discourse where he tells them and us, no matter what, abide in me. No matter how bad things are, no matter that you're going to want to run away and hide in a locked upper room, abide in me. We can't fix ourselves nor our neighbors, be they the person living next door, our city, our country, Palestine, Israel, creation. And if we try, we most likely will wither. But Jesus in this passage that comes before. This vine passage comes before he tells us to love one another. Invites us to abide in him. Be rooted in him. Be rooted in his life. Be rooted in his word. This isn't a warning or a command, but an invitation. It's a promise. Receive your sustenance. Receive your strength. Receive your energy, your nourishment, your love from me, and you will bear fruit. The fruit will come from abiding in the vine and being connected to all the other branches. There's something so freeing in that. Jesus is the vine, the source. When we're plugged into him, his love flows through us like sap out of a maple tree. And we end up loving and bearing fruit in some ways, in many ways, in spite of ourselves. In the name of the one who is the vine, Jesus. Amen.